Hello students, today we will be discussing the topic accommodation of regional aspirations based on language. The objective behind today's discussion is to give you an insight about the nature of linguistic aspirations in the pre-independence period, nature of demands in the linguistic movements in India, as well as the constitutional provisions relating to language and linguistic minorities. For the convenience of our understanding, I have divided the entire lecture into a number of segments. The framework of the discussion would be based on emergence of language as an identity. Then we would move on to the language questions in the pre-independence period. Then the role of the Indian National Congress in accommodation of language. We would move on to the Constituent Assembly debates on language, linguistic commissions and their recommendations, and finally the linguistic reorganization of provinces along with the constitutional provisions pertaining to language. Let us start with the basic question: why is language so very important in multicultural societies? Students, multicultural states are usually characterized by diversities in language, religion, culture, tribe and the like. Amongst these different identity markers, language is the most significant and is believed to be the most powerful medium of social interaction and is said to be an important identifier to keep the society organized. In a multilingual country like India, protection and promotion of language has been the main concern of the different linguistic groups since independence. India's linguistic diversity was a source of skepticism about the durability of the Indian state in the early years since independence. The relationship between region, language and statehood has been a subject of political inquiry since the last few decades, and language per se has been a very powerful tool of integration as well as disintegration in the world. Language is not simply, students, a descriptive marker of identity of a particular community. Rather, it needs to be examined from the perspective of political nationalism also. Language is a powerful tool of political nationalism and this cannot be undermined. Given the importance of linguistic aspirations in the pre-independence days in India, this was considered very essential by the colonial administrators who devised different techniques to classify and categorize the linguistic demography of India to capture the regional concentration of different linguistic communities. And how did the colonial administrators did it? Censuses, gazetteers, linguistic survey reports and ethnographical accounts recorded the linguistic diversity for purposes of colonial control over the vast and heterogeneous social structure in India. Let us try to understand the pre-independence period, how language served as a powerful tool of identity expression. In India, paradoxically it may seem, language has been a powerful factor for unifying people since the days of British rule and the Indian freedom struggle. Lokmanya Tilak was perhaps the first national leader to appreciate this conspicuous feature of the Indian society and to advocate the reorganization of provinces on the basis of language, with a view to promoting unity and diversity. Tilak wrote as early as 1891, I quote Tilak, "The present administrative division of India is the result of certain historic processes and in some cases purely the result of accident. If they are replaced by units formed on a linguistic basis, each of them will have some measure of homogeneity and will provide encouragement to the people and languages of the respective regions." The genesis of the movements for linguistic statehood can be traced to the partition of Bengal of 1905. Not only did the Bengali-speaking people learn to think in terms of linguistic unity and the establishment of the province on the basis of language, but the contagion was automatically caught by the people of Bihar and Orissa. In fact, this is the genesis of linguistic movement in India, both on the grounds of tradition and on grounds of separate linguistic affiliation. They all demanded a province of their own. In fact, the Indian National Congress has supported the idea of reorganizing provinces on a more rational basis, say the issue of language, and it was contended that among the different criteria of reorganization, language would be the most sensible and rational one. Let us come to the role of the Indian National Congress in the pre-independence period and how they tried to accommodate linguistic aspirations. The Congress protested against the British policy of the partition of Bengal at its 21st session held in Benares in 1905. The resolution stated, "This Congress recommends the adoption of some arrangement which would be consistent with administrative efficiency and would place the entire Bengali community under one undivided administration." It was argued that Bengali language united the people irrespective of religious considerations, and partition of Bengal was a vicious game of divide and rule played by the British colonial administrators. Beginning in 1908, when a province of Bihar was created in the organizational setup of Congress, the party was organizationally restructured with the creation of 21 vernacular units in the form of provincial Congress committees. The Indian National Congress supported the idea of vernacular reorganization of provinces. And in order to further realize the goal of linguistic reorganization of provinces, the Congress set up a separate Andhra Circle in 1917 and a separate Sindh Circle in 1918. The Indian National Congress in its Nagpur session in the year 1920 unanimously confirmed that one of the main objectives of the national struggle was linguistic reorganization of provinces. After the Nagpur session, the provincial Congress committees were set up on the basis of language. In fact, Congress was divided on the basis of linguistic zones. For example, there was the Karnataka Provincial Congress Committee, there was the Maharashtra Provincial Congress Committee, and Orissa Provincial Congress Committee. Thus, for the first time, Congress started to reorganize its units on the basis of language. Subsequently, Dr. Annie Besant and the Home Rule movement also focused on the need for recognition of language as an important identifier. In February 1918, a formal resolution was adopted in the Indian Legislative Council calling for the reorganization of provinces on the basis of language. The same objective was also reiterated in the 1928 Nehru Report. It was subsequently emphasized that the existing multilingual states and provinces in India would create political difficulties, while homogeneous linguistic states would encourage greater political cohesion, administrative efficiency, and economic development. The linguistic principle was officially adopted by the Indian National Congress in its subsequent election manifesto. Let us come to the Constituent Assembly debates. We know that the Constituent Assembly was set up on 9 December 1946, and thereafter the question of linguistic reorganization of provinces was intensely debated in the Constituent Assembly. Different members of the Constituent Assembly expressed their views for and against linguistic reorganization of provinces. Let us try to understand some of the views raised in the Constituent Assembly. Pattabhi Sitaramayya, one of the foremost members of the Constituent Assembly, accepted and declared that the issue of linguistic provinces must be taken up as the first and foremost problem to be solved by the Constituent Assembly. The formation of the constitution of a country would be meaningless if it was not open to the framers to determine the provinces of the country. P.S. Deshmukh, another member of the Constituent Assembly, contended that Constituent Assembly should draft a constitution favoring a strong unitary government irrespective of the passion for linguistic provinces. Maulana Azad, another important member of the Constituent Assembly, said that the demand for linguistic provinces and other particularistic tendencies were gathering strength in the country, and the only way of maintaining Indian solidarity was to give a commanding position to the center in the new constitutional setup. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, stated that regardless of the basis of the formation of states, the relationship between the center and the states should be based on the principle of equality. Thereafter, the advocates of linguistic provinces adopted different resolutions and imposed pressure on the Constituent Assembly to adopt the principle of linguistic reorganization of the Indian provinces. Now, on the basis of these resolutions, three important commissions were set up. One was the Dar Commission, the second was the JVP Committee, and the third was the States Reorganization Commission. Students, let us quickly go through the major recommendations of these three commissions. Let us start with the Dar Commission, which was set up in the year 1948. This commission was called the Linguistic Provinces Commission, and it was headed by S.K. Dar, retired judge of the Allahabad High Court. Other prominent members included Panna Lal, a retired member of the Indian Civil Service, and Jagat Narayan Lal, a member of the Constituent Assembly. The Dar Commission made a number of observations pertaining to the issue of linguistic reorganization. Firstly, the Commission observed that provinces aspiring for autonomy should be linguistically homogeneous. The existence of any other language speakers might create disputes and thereby give rise to majorities and minorities. Secondly, they opined that formation of linguistic provinces has some merits as well as demerits. While linguistic statehood may lead to inter-provincial isolation, on the contrary, creation of linguistic states would lead to administrative convenience, since the entire governmental machinery would be conducted in one language, the language of the masses. The Dar Commission further observed that the Commission was not in favor of immediate reorganization of provinces on the basis of language, since the country was not in a position to bear the administrative and financial strain that the new provinces would impose on the center. The Commission upheld that linguistic homogeneity in the formation of new provinces is certainly attainable within certain limits, but only at the cost of creating a fresh minority problem. The Dar Commission apprehended that if in a linguistic province the majority language group comes to regard the territory of the entire province as exclusively their own, the time cannot be distant when it will come to regard the minority living in the same province and people living outside it as not their own. And once that stage is reached, it will only be a question of time for that sub-nation to consider itself into a full nation. As such, the Commission vehemently opposed the reorganization of states on the basis of language and recommended that provinces should be organized for administrative convenience and not for recognition of language. They even went to the extent of saying that the existing subnational tendencies demanding linguistic statehood should be suppressed. However, the report was fervently opposed throughout the country, and slogans such as Oikko Kerala, Vishal Andhra and Samyukta Maharashtra went through the country. Agitation started in the country against the Dar Commission recommendations. As a result, the Congress in the Jaipur session in the year 1948 itself set up the JVP Committee, consisting of Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel and Pattabhi Sitaramaiah as their members, to re-examine the possibility of linguistic statehood. Like the Dar Commission, the JVP report to dismiss the idea of linguistic reorganization of provinces on the basis of language. However, there was an optimistic note, as it conceded that if public sentiment is insistent and overwhelming, we as democrats have to submit to it, subject to certain limitations in regard to the good of India as a whole. The report also stated that We felt that the present is not the opportune time for the formation of new provinces. It would unmistakably retard the process of consolidation of our gains, dislocate our administrative and financial structure, let loose, and while we are still in a formative state, forces of disruption and disintegration seriously interfere with the progressive solution of our economic and political difficulties. Thus, the JVV committee opposed the idea of linguistic reorganization. Interestingly, students, it was the same Congress which had strongly supported the demand for linguistic reorganization of provinces way back in 1920, but in 1948 it vacillated from the same demand. Let us move on. What was the repercussion after these two commission reports were made public? The entire country witnessed violent agitations. The fast unto death in 1952 of the legendary Telugu Gandhian leader Potti Srimalu for a state for the Telugu speakers out of the composite Madras presidency moved an otherwise reluctant Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of the country, to concede to the demand of a Telugu-speaking state of Andhra. Following widespread agitation, the centre was forced to create the state of Andhra in 1953. The creation of the state of Andhra Pradesh opened the floodgates for other linguistic aspirations in the country. It boosted the demands for other linguistic groups. The centre realized that linguistic passions could no longer be suppressed. For a comprehensive study of the question of linguistic reorganization and possibility for further reorganization, the States Reorganization Commission was set up in the year 1953. The States Reorganization Commission thoroughly analyzed the political, administrative and socio-cultural aspects for the creation of linguistic states. The Commission concluded that creation of linguistic states on the principle of linguistic homogeneity resulted in administrative convenience. The broad principles enunciated by the Commission were: number one, preservation of unity and integrity of the country; second, preservation of linguistic and cultural homogeneity; third, financial, economic and administrative stability; and fourthly, successful working of the 5-year plans. On the basis of the recommendation of the SRC, the States Reorganization Act was enacted in 1956. What did the Act recommend and provide for? It provided for 14 states and 6 centrally administered territories. The government accepted most of the recommendations of the States Reorganization Commission, leading to the redrawing of the map of India by creating linguistically homogeneous states, particularly in the south. The States Reorganization Act erased the distinction of earlier Part A, Part B and Part C states and reorganized state boundaries on the basis of language, reducing the number of states from the earlier 27 to 14 states plus 6 union territories. The Telangana area of Hyderabad state was transferred to Andhra. Thus started the process of linguistic reorganization. Kerala was created by merging the Malabar district of the old Madras presidency with Travancore Cochin. Certain Kannada-speaking areas of the states of Bombay, Madras and Hyderabad and Coorg were attached to the Mysore state. Bombay state was enlarged by merging the states of Kutch and Saurashtra and the Marathi-speaking areas of Hyderabad with it. The strongest reaction against the SRC's report and the States Reorganization Act came from Maharashtra, where widespread agitation took place because they were unable to accept this particular act of reorganization of Bombay. Under pressure, the government decided in 1956 to divide the Bombay state into 2 linguistic states of Maharashtra and Gujarat, with Bombay city forming a separate centrally administered state. This was the scheme of reorganization. This move was strongly opposed by the Maharashtrians in view of the disagreement over Bombay city, and the government stuck to its decision and passed the Reorganization Act in November 1956. As Congress leader, Mrs. Indira Gandhi reopened the question and was supported by the then President S. Radhakrishnan. The government finally agreed in May 1960 to bifurcate the state of Bombay into Maharashtra and Gujarat, with Bombay city being included in Maharashtra and Ahmedabad being made a part and capital of Gujarat. In Punjab, also an exception was made to the linguistic principle. In 1956, the states of PEPSU has been merged with Punjab, which however remained a trilingual state having 3 languages: Punjabi, Hindi and Pahari. The SRC had refused to accept the demand for a separate Punjabi speaking state on the ground that it would solve neither the language question nor the communal problem in Punjab which has started after the partition. However, in 1966, Mrs. Indira Gandhi agreed to the division of Punjab and Hindi speaking states of Punjab and Haryana. What happened was the Punjabi speaking state of Punjab was recognized and the Hindi speaking areas led to the formation of Haryana, with Pahari speaking districts transferred to Himachal Pradesh. Now, what happened also was that Chandigarh, the newly built city, was made the capital of United Punjab and it became a union territory and it shared the status of capital for both Haryana as well as Punjab. Now, the reorganization of provinces happened from the 1950s and continued till the mid-60s. Let us come to the next section. What are the provisions in the Indian Constitution pertaining to language and linguistic minorities? The linguistic diversity in India till date is stupendous and dialects change after every few miles. Currently, there are more than 1,652 languages spoken in India. Of them, 22 have been officially recognized and listed in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. These are considered to be the major languages in the country. However, Article 343 of the Constitution provides that Hindi in Devanagari script shall be the official language of the Union and English shall continue to be used for all official purposes of the Union. Originally for a period of 15 years, but in terms of the Official Languages Act 1963, it still continues to be used in addition to Hindi. Let us move on to other provisions contained in the Constitution. The Constitution sought to afford relief to regional linguistic groups by allowing the respective state legislatures under Article 345 and the President under Article 347 to recognize some languages other than Hindi as the language of intra-state official transactions. These provisions recognize the right of the minorities of the state legislature or a substantial section of the population of the state to have the language spoken by them to be recognized as the official language of the state. Article 344 provides the appointment of a language commission to advise the President relating to official language, and the President shall constitute the language with representatives of the recognized languages as specified in the 8th schedule. Article 347 provides for the recognition of any other language for the official purpose of a state upon a substantial popular demand for it being made to the President. The Constitution also provides for linguistic minorities, safeguards for linguistic minorities and the appointment of a special officer to deal with such matters and report to the President under Article 350 Clause B. On the basis of the discussion we just had, the first reorganization extended the democratic dispensation by creating several units in order to enable the linguistic communities develop themselves by using a common medium of recognition and expression and facilitating the participation of the people in their own mother tongue. Secondly, we also found that this was not something extra constitutional, but well within the limits of the provisions contained in the Constitution. Thirdly, the first reorganization was based on accommodation of ethno-linguistic and cultural communities which have since then occupied a preeminent position in Indian politics and in the Indian model of governance. It was the first time that India was federalized on the basis of a culturally identifiable basis, and that was language. Traditionally, no Indian state even after reorganization, is monolingual. Most of the states have a considerable number of other language speakers. Now, this linguistic majority is not only confined to the own home state, but can simultaneously found in other states also. Linguistic reorganization students have not led to linguistic homogenization. The Union has never imposed its will arbitrarily on the regions by jumbling one linguistic group in one state. Rather, people's aspirations and democratic temperance were the primary objective behind the reorganization of provinces. Interplay of multiple factors have paved the way for linguistic reorganization of provinces, but it has not undermined the unity and integrity of the country. Let us quickly summarize what we have learned today. We studied that language is a powerful tool of political mobilization. We also studied the role of the Indian National Congress in the formative period of the colonial struggle and how language was a tool of political communication and political nationalism. We also studied the Constituent Assembly debates pertaining to language. We studied about the different commissions set up to resolve the language issue. Then we studied the various matters pertaining to constitutional provisions pertaining to language and linguistic minorities and the reorganization of India on the basis of language. Thank you.